program section of our meeting. Our program tonight is going to be Exploring the Artist Within. Our speaker, David Downs, has had a passion for photography for as long as he can remember. Over time, of course, like all of us, he did manage to get a camera or two, and although the stated purpose of all those cameras was to capture images of his rambunctious sons, he still managed to sneak in a few creative images on each roll. And today, David Downs runs two photography businesses. David Downs Photography, his first business, is his platform for producing award-winning commercial work, branded campaigns, portraiture, and the creative art that motivates his time behind the camera. Benton Downs Photography, his other business, allows David, in collaboration with his business partner, Barry Benton, to share his passion and love of photography with others. From classes such as an introduction to photography, editing classes, creative photography.
I will stop my share. Hand it over to you.
Okay. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yes, David. I can. You okay in the room?
We're good.
Okay.
And so I can see 2 or 3 folks on the screen here, but I guess, Tim, you're in a room with a bunch of folks or something?
Tim.
Yeah, he stepped away, so he's
Okay, he's going to turn it.
Oh, he's turning things.
Oh, he's going to try to turn
There
it.
you go. I went to grab the.
Oh, wow, look at there. There's a whole bunch of people. Oh my God.
Okay.
Hey, everybody. Good to see you. All right, so I need to share my screen, so let me
so we can see.
Yeah. This worked earlier, so I'm pretty confident that it'll work again. It's got to get to the right spot. All right. Is that showing up on your end now?
I can see it on my screen. Assume there's room.
Can the room see it, Tim?
Yep, we got
Okay,
we got
very
you.
All right. So I'm thanks for the intro, Chuck. It's about 30 seconds longer than I'd like for it to be. Like most people that speak, long introductions are sometimes they're just a little embarrassing, maybe, or something. But it's a pleasure to be speaking to you all. I do this when I'm asked because I like to help, I like to share, and I've done this many times. I've done other presentations around specific topics such as night sky photography, or I've done, some editing classes and things like that. But this Artist Within is something that it seems to be well received, and people reach out to me afterwards and say, wow, that was kind of eye-opening, and it helped me grow. It helped me see things a different way. It changed my photography in a positive way, which I think is that's a win for everybody. It's humbling for me to think that I make an impact on someone's art, but anyway, so I'm going to move forward. We'll talk a little bit about what motivates me, what inspires me. The phrase at the bottom here, art is an unseen energy within an individual, willing itself into physical form, a voice expressed. I came up with that probably 7, 8, 9 years ago, whenever I first set up, I think, my Facebook photography account, and I was trying to explain, what drives a person creatively. What is it that that causes us to try to create beautiful images? And for some people, the beauty is simply in the capture of the object, whatever it is, a bird, a child, a pond in the morning, whatever it might be. And for others, it's bringing about all the potential that's in a bird or in a pond, everything that it could be. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about my journey through moving from what I consider to be a photographer to more of an artist. And just share that with you. And then obviously we'll have some time for questions at the end, and I will do my best to answer anything that you've got. So these questions I came about because I was asking myself, how do I see the world differently than other people? And how does most photographers I know, in particular those that are kind of artistic, do they see the world differently than other photographers? And so there's things like this. I mean, I can go someplace and I'm in a location and I'm with 2 or 3 people or whatever, and they're almost constantly saying, come on, David, because I'm still captured by what I'm seeing in the scene. And it may be obvious to me what it is that I'm looking at and that's caught my attention. And sometimes it's me trying to figure out what is it exactly about this thing that I'm looking at or this scene that has me so mesmerized or has me so engrossed. And then, if sometimes I see something and I go, I've seen this before, but it was different. And so sometimes I think it's because I've imagined what this would look like. And I do that a lot in my photography. And we'll get more into that later. And when you go into a new place, are you the kind of person that you're immediately looking for things like leading lines, or you're looking for patterns or a break in patterns? You're capturing and mentally cataloging all those composition kind of elements that make up good images. And, if you do that, then again, you're probably more of an artistic mind. And then I like this question. Would others say you are sometimes irrationally happy when observing sunsets, sunrises, just clouds in the sky, or maybe a flower covered in dew? So are there things that just really just make you smile and make you happy when other people would say, oh, that's a nice sunset, and you just feel the sunset? You feel the light that's in the air, that's bouncing off of everything. And someone else would just say, oh, that's a pretty sunset, So that's part of that seeing things differently. And I think listening to that voice, listening to it is how you can kind of expand your capabilities as a photographer and as an artist. And so the listening is key. I'm going to call it learning the language. It's funny because, it's yourself, or it's certainly the energy within you that's speaking to you, but listening to it in terms of understanding what it is that it's saying, what it's telling you. It's kind of, and I'm not by any means like having an inner eye or anything like that. It's more a case of this feeling when you see something and it just kind of resonates with you, listening to that and exploring it to understand, why am I getting this feeling? What is it that's giving me this feeling? So that in the future, you start to understand that. You start to recognize more quickly, oh, this is why this resonates so strongly with me. This is the element that's here that has my inner artist going, oh, here's lots of opportunity. Here's a tremendous amount of opportunity for you in terms of creating something. So I like to study art and artists. I just got back. I spent 3 days in Barcelona, 4 days in Mallorca, and a week in Florence. So I had tons of art to look at and artists to check out. And I always try to take away something new, a new way of seeing light, a new way of posing. As an example, in Florence, in one of the many places that we kind of explored, I took quite a few pictures of the statuary for posing purposes, because I'm thinking to myself, could I do, a series of portraiture style images that are meant to mimic the look and feel of some Renaissance statuary, something like that. Get inspired. I'll talk more about that in a minute. And then it's a personal journey because, you know, for some people, it's not about the art, as I said. And I know people that are prolific photographers and take beautiful photographs. But none of them, they would not say they were an artist. They're just a good photographer or a great photographer for that matter. I'm always trying to find a way to get some artistic elements into my images. And so for me, that's more of that personal journey. If you're interested in creating more artistic looks, I think it's a journey that you would enjoy and that would strengthen your photography. Because in order to sometimes get that more artistic look, you have to get better at the photography part, because the photography is essentially your raw material that you use to create the art that you're going to try to, you know, present to the world, so to speak. And, you know, appropriately enough, I just got back from Florence, and Michelangelo, of course, is buried there. And they say Michelangelo, but he said the sculpture is already complete within the marble block before I ever even start. It's already there. I just have to chisel away the superfluous material. And that was his approach. He could see in the marble before he started what was there. He just removed all the pieces that weren't necessary. And in some respects, I do a lot of the same thing. I don't do a lot of combinations where I'm adding a bunch of things. It's very much an artistic approach now to photography. The PPA has a designation or a degree, a master of artist, or master artist, I guess. And it's for combining elements into an image. And I haven't really gone down that path. Occasionally I'll blend a couple of things, but I'm really not trying to create those style of images. So this person was very influential early on for me when I really got into this about 11 years ago or so, when I really started getting serious about it. DeWitt Jones was a National Geographic photographer, and at some point he left National Geographic and went out on his own and created a series of books and videos and things around creativity and photography, and really more of a motivational speaker, I guess. And he has this video called Everyday Creativity, and it's through Star Thrower Distribution, and you can go get there and you can actually watch the video. Now you have to agree that you're not going to distribute it. It has like a disclaimer thing that'll run across the bottom and kind of a watermark thing. And I've considered buying it before, and maybe I will someday and use it as an intro to a class or something. But his approach to digging into something and figuring out exactly what it is that motivated you to take that image, and understanding that there are more than one right option or approach to taking an image. And some of his stories around how he wound up with some of his award-winning images are really inspirational. So I'd encourage you, if you get a chance and want to take the time. I think it's about a 20-minute video, something like that. It's worth the effort. So this is an image by a man named Joel Grimes. I'm drinking some wine this evening. So Joel was somebody I stumbled across early on, and I thought his work was just insanely creative. And he was somebody, when I did some research, discovered that he's kind of recreated himself 2 or 3 times over. If you're not familiar with his work, he started out long ago in the film time, and his approach to doing things, I thought his ability to see light and understand it, to me, was just incredible. And he's one of the very first people that I started trying to like download a video or buy a video or something from. And I don't, I can't see everybody, but there's an organization, well, Texas Professional Photographers Association has something called Texas School. If you've not heard of it before, I encourage you to take a look at it. In particular, if you're a portrait style photographer or enjoy doing that type of photography, because you can get, for a really inexpensive price, you can get a week with a photographer that you choose. So you sign up for classes and you spend all week with this one photographer learning things from him. And in this case, I went to Joel's class. I signed up for it when I found out he was coming. I signed up for it. And we must not have been 10 minutes into the class when he said something that really changed my trajectory. And I was at a point, I was probably about 3 years into taking pictures, and I felt frustrated. I felt like kind of restrained, or I was trapped. I was frustrated with my work. I was all these kinds of issues. And about 10 minutes into the class, he says, you need to decide today, right now, are you a photographer or are you an artist? Because that will change your approach to how you take images. And it was like the light bulb went on for me. It was like, okay, I'm trying to confine myself into this photographer box, when in truth, I'm really much more of an artist in how I want to present myself, how I want to communicate my work. I have stayed in touch with Joel and continue to follow him. And occasionally he puts out something that I go, that's interesting. I want to learn more about that style of photography. He's very diverse in what he can do. And then there's a guy named Ben V. Ben is a Canadian photographer, and I actually stumbled across him because at one point I had a life of goal of hiking the Appalachian Trail. Now it's like 2,300 miles or something from northern Georgia to Maine. It's a through hike, takes about 6 months. And I was following people that were doing that, and Ben was one of them, and his photography on this trip was just incredible. And so I started kind of researching and digging into him a little bit. And he does weddings, engagement photos, things like that. But I always found that his images had more energy in them. And when you think of compositional elements like leading lines or framing or depth of field or isolation or patterns or all of these things, I've never seen anyone that would combine more elements into a single photo, and it all seemed to just fit naturally. So I followed him, and we spoke on several occasions. And to this day, I would say he's one of my main inspirations in terms of trying to figure out how to take better images and seeing things through my camera lens, seeing what's there. So those were two very inspirational people to me. And then you guys, and by you, I mean every other photographer out there. I am constantly looking at other sites. I'm 500 Pix, UPic, Viewbug, almost anything. If I'm going to a location, I go to Google Maps, I put in the location, and on the left side are images that people have posted that they've taken. I'll go look through those and just see what are other photographers seeing out there. So I'm constantly being inspired by other photographers, because I'm certainly not, the end all of all of that. I've got lots to learn every day. So I share this image. It's a image I took when I was just getting started. I don't want to back up too far, but in 2004, I discovered I had melanoma. I went through some surgery and some scans and all that, and it worked out, but it led me down a path of raising money for team and training. And in 2011, I decided I'm going to do an Ironman triathlon because I was 50. And so I told myself if I could complete the training, I would buy myself a real camera, not a point and shoot, but a real camera with exchangeable lenses, like I used to have years ago with film. And so I did that. And this is one of the pictures that I took after I got the camera. And I remember thinking at the time, oh, that's a cool image, because basically the roses were in focus and the background wasn't. So I was working with my first compositional element, depth of field. And it took about a year or so. And then I began taking images more like this, which was like, what is the true beauty in that scene or in that element? And eventually, to me, it boiled down into that softness of the petals. They're not even all perfect, but that golden center with the details there and the soft background. So here you've got a lot of different elements at play. And it's just obviously a much different image, and certainly has a much stronger appeal. And so it's just kind of moving from that, I'm taking a pretty picture with one potential compositional element, the one that's combining more things. And certainly it's a different style of photography with the macro, but it gives you a sense of the difference that I was making in some steps. So here's a beggar in Rome. We were in Rome. This was in 2018. And we had spent 3 weeks in Italy. This is at the tail end of the 3 weeks. As a matter of fact, it was the last day we were there. I was going to my 487th church to take pictures of the ceilings. And I walked by this gentleman, and I was probably 50 yards past him. And I went, I've got to go back and take his picture. And so I walked back, and I took these shots here. I took several, and then I put some money in his hat and kept going. And I'm walking down the sidewalk in Rome, looking at the back of my camera, forwarding through the images that I took, trying to see if I had what I wanted. Somehow didn't get run over or run into anybody, and decided I didn't have what I wanted. So I went back and took some more pictures. I only took 3 or 4, because then he looked at me and kind of shook his head. So he had all the attention that he wanted. And I took this image here on the left. And to me, that was much more of what I wanted as raw material, because what I really wanted to produce was this, a very black and white, textured, contrast profile image of him. Some people would say, yeah, but you've lost the environment, the graffiti on the bank building and everything else. And I agree with that. That's not why I took the picture. In my head, in my vision, the reason I went back, the whole reason I took this picture from this angle, was to get what I needed to be able to create the image on the right. I knew the image on the right was what I wanted before I ever took the image. And when I walked by the first time and I took the images, I wasn't 100% certain exactly where I was headed, but I had a good idea in my head. And it wasn't until I looked at the back of my camera and realized I don't have something I can use to create what I really wanted, which was this profile view of this beggar. And the second show I did at the pre-opening, an artist that came from Chicago down was visiting his niece or somebody here. And he's done shows and books and stuff up in Chicago. And anyway, he bought this before anyone got in the door. And I had done it just as a framed print, and he was the first one in, and he was the first one to buy it. But I've always been proud of that image. So what could you do with this image, right? I'm in a pond up in northern Arkansas. I don't know, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, a pair of swans got lost and wound up at this pond, spent the winter there. And now they have like 200 to 300 of them that come to this pond every year. I mean, you see the feathers all over the background and on the water and stuff. to me, I didn't care about really any of that. My main focus was on what I had going on here with the reflection, the way I wanted it with the neck and the head. And so I turn it into this. So I clean up the water, I get rid of all of the distractions and let it focus on this. And again, you can see I went to black and white because the color didn't matter. It wasn't about the color. This also has sold pretty well in my shows and then through my gallery as well. So this is Mexico, and by itself, this isn't a bad photo. I've got the boat headed to the right. I've got it centered, maybe slightly off center, so you get a little bit of the trail behind it. But there are several distractional elements, and if you recall, I talked about Michelangelo and him removing the superfluous material. So in this, when I'm looking at it, I'm going, I don't want this black line across here. It doesn't add anything to the photo. These black balls that are floating here are a distraction. The bird's kind of cool, but I don't know if I need it. And in the end, I decided, all right, I'm going to go this way. So I got rid of the deal. And this is if you saw the current image, I need to replace this in here. This is so burned out on the right, and I'm not sure why it looks that way. But I added this feature here on the left, and I actually did some editing in Photoshop to expand the screen to the left. So I made it more of a wide, short image, and I thought it was more powerful that way. This image is one of the ones I have that's going in the PPA Imaging Excellence book. It did well, but again, it's a slightly different edit. As I said, I'm not sure why this is showing up so dark on the bottom right there. Anyone been to White Sands? So I do White Sands workshops, and this is one from 2 years ago, I believe. I was out there, and this is what you're seeing is kind of the raw file from that image that I took. It's actually, this is a pano. I do a lot of pano images. And it's kind of hard to tell here. I shoot with a standard profile and stuff, so it's about as flat as you can get. It's kind of hard to tell, but there is a lot of dust that's on the horizon there, and there's a little bit of an orange glow coming from the right over here to the side. But I knew what I wanted, which is if you think about compositional elements, you have this compression look, because I'm shooting, I'm sure I was at 500 millimeters on this. So you've got compression, you've got geographic shapes that are going on. From a color tone standpoint, just looking at this, you go, well, there's not a lot of color contrast. But in my mind, when I'm standing there and envisioning this, it's getting later in the evening. We still got some glow from the sun. So I've got a natural compositional opportunity here with blues and oranges. And this image also is received an imaging excellence from PPA. So I knew what I could go with. I knew where I could go with this. I wanted more orange in the sky. I wanted more blues, cool tones on the bottom. So from a compositional standpoint, I've got good contrast from a color standpoint. And to break everything up, I've got this dark clump of bushes here that just keeps your eye kind of moving around the screen. You don't get trapped in one area or the other. So I mentioned that I did an Ironman, and I had bought that camera. I was in Arizona. Is where I did the Ironman, and we were on our way back, and we were driving through an area called Peoples Valley, Peeples, Peoples Valley, beautiful area. It was in November. The cottonwoods were all decked out in their gold, and driving down this road, and I noticed that I'm seeing this stuff, and I'm just constantly kind of going, oh my God, it's so beautiful. I got to do this. So eventually I turned around. My wife, bless her heart, very, very patient person now. She's learned to be, I guess. So I grabbed this image, and I mean, this is what I took 12 years ago. This is the raw file. This is what it looked like. But with some editing, this is what I submitted. And again, this is another image that's going to wind up in the book for PPA. So I knew when I took the image that I wasn't happy with just what the camera was capturing. I knew I wanted more, but this edit is something that I did 6 years after I took that image. The first time I edited the image, it didn't look quite like this. I didn't have the skill set that I needed to probably create what I wanted. But it's an example too of how really kind of poor images can be made into something very artistic, very creative. This is a vertical panorama out in Death Valley. This is where I had multiple kind of steps to it. If you look, I've cleaned it up. There was like some black spots out kind of partway through the horizon that I got rid of, enhanced the sky, and ultimately decided I wanted motion in the sky. I wanted it to look like a long exposure. So I took and added some motion blur into the sky. This is one of the ones that usually gets the most kind of, it doesn't look like it could possibly be the same image, but so this is in our Arkansas workshop. We do it in October each year. And this is one of my favorite spots there. It's just above Haw Creek Falls. And if you just look at this as a whole, you're kind of going, okay, that looks kind of dull. But again, that's because it's just a flat image out of a camera. Here's what I saw when I was looking at it was, think of the color that could be there. Think of the contrast. I've got to do some cleanup. So if I go back, you can see I've got, leaves and, heading out into the water. There's some areas with some floating debris in the water, things like that. You've got this real bright sky down here at the bottom. So I eliminated the things that were a distraction from what I wanted to be the core part of the image, and that I felt like was some of the strongest elements. And again, my guess is that for those of you that are seeing it, particularly on a projection screen, none of these colors are looking the way they are in real life. But this one also is going in the Imaging Excellence book for this year. This is Caddo Lake. My guess is some of you guys have been to Caddo Lake.
Yeah.
And this is again another panorama. I took it probably at 500 millimeters. It was a foggy morning, but the sun was up, so it was really everything was pretty bright. I wanted it bright, and I took a pano so that I could figure out what it was that I wanted. Initially, I was looking at these old duck blinds that were kind of broken down, and I do have another image that I've worked with in the past that included those for a duck hunting club. And so I did a kind of a thing for them, but in the end, I kind of focused in on this group of trees, and with some editing, it kind of became this. This is not the final image that I wound up using, but this one kind of went viral for me online with I don't know, several thousands of shares and views and stuff. And it's one of those images where it's kind of emblematic, I guess, or a symbol, kind of a Caddo that I've seen with other images, and why Caddo Lake, for those that haven't been there, I mean, it's almost impossible to get in now and find a boat captain. We have 30 seats in our workshop this November. They're all sold, and we have a waiting list. And we have people starting to sign up already for 2024. So it's a unique environment and offers some incredible photography opportunities. This is from Cabo earlier this year in March, and I put it in just as a way of showing, I set up specifically to capture the image that you'll see in a second, but I knew I was going to have to capture 2 or 3. this is one that I wanted. And I've exposed for those bright spots in the far right, far upper right there. The sun was setting, it was the last part of the day. And I exposed for that. And that meant a fairly fast shutter speed. The water is pretty much frozen. It isn't really moving anywhere. And then I exposed for the motion of the water. I wanted to get these sweeping waves coming in with the lines that form from the water rushing in or rushing out, either way. And then blending those together so that you get a foreground element with a lot of texture and some color and some light reflecting off of it with the water, and then that darker horizon line with that orange glow on the right. So it's, again, pre-visioning and going in knowing I want to capture an image that has foreground interest, light contrast, strong color contrast. I can't get that in one image. It's going to take me capturing a couple of images and blending them in order to wind up with this kind of look. This is something that has become a little bit of a, I don't know, it's becoming popular, I'll put it that way. Intentional camera movement, ICM. There are multiple communities, Facebook groups, Instagram groups, etc., out there that are focused on ICM images. And I think they create a very interesting artistic look. A little hint, if you're going to experiment with this, doing it with ultra wide lenses at 14 millimeter is pretty difficult. You get the distortion on the sides, and so it's difficult. You're usually better off doing motion in a direction that's complements the natural direction of lines. So in this case, I have a whole series of waves rolling in toward the beach. And so I get this strong horizontal linear look to the entire image. You've got a long horizon in front of you. You've got the clouds that are linear left to right. You've got the shoreline. And so this is just moving the camera slightly left to right as I'm taking an image. I've been asked to do basically a Zoom session or something that gets a little deeper into this. I've got another example I will show you and talk about, shutter speeds and what's important, what's not important. And that may be something I'll be doing shortly. But here's another one that I did. This was in Cabo. The last one was in Oregon at a workshop earlier this year that I led. This one I did on purpose with a little bit of a sway to the movement. So instead of moving strictly horizontal, I wanted there to be a little dip in it. I wanted there to be a little bit of a curved motion because of the waves that were coming into the beach. And so I wanted that repeating motion to show up in the images. And so this is kind of a unique images. You have the beach, and then you have some rocks running out into the water. And then you have that motion in the waves, in the water and in the shoreline. And I've got somebody already who wants to buy this. I've just got to get motivated to get it on my website so they can purchase the image. This is a harbor with boats. I was shooting fairly wide. And can you guys see my cursor on the screen too? Yeah. So you can see over on the edges how the vertical lines are kind of curved. And when you're shooting with like above about or wider than about 25 to 30 millimeters, you're going to get some of that. In this case, too, you can see we've kind of got the masks are leaning, and when I went in to edit the image, I straightened those up a little bit. I added a strong contrast to it. I cooled it off dramatically, and I really wanted the colors to pop in the center there. I didn't have to do a lot of movement with this. It wasn't a lot of movement with the camera to get just that vertical motion. So, but again, I'm going up and down instead of left or right because the strong vertical nature of all those masks work best with intentional camera movement if you're going vertical, the same as with the masks. This is the city of Dallas, and the river was flooded here, the Trinity River. I had a group of students down and caught this shot. At the time that I took it, I was kind of like, okay, whatever. But I knew I had some reflection in the water and that I could work with that. And so that became this image, which wound up on the cover of a magazine up here. And it's the image that's behind me on the wall too, as a matter of fact. But I thought that was a way to kind of rescue it a little bit in terms of taking something that I considered kind of a ho-hum image, and I went, what can I do with this? I at least had some decent reflections in the water, and so I went there with it, and that worked out pretty good. And then as I began exploring again other ways to make things interesting, I went into Photoshop and used motion blur to do this. And now this has become a centerpiece for a commercial group in terms of their art display. And again, all just looking beyond what's there and going, what can you do with that? You know, what's possible with it? So that worked that way. This is Miami. Again, pretty flat looking. This was in the morning. I knew with the colors that I could see with my eye, and then certainly with the colors that I could envision, that I could do better than that. And so I took it up a notch, not too dramatic. I have another one that's much bolder than this in terms of color. If you look, you can see the water there. You can see the waves in it. You can see the ripples and things like that. And then I took it here, much more dramatic, more graphic design almost look. And you can see the water. I've gone in and smoothed that out. And then kind of like the Dallas skyline said, well, can't I do more with that? And this one, I have a restaurant in Miami that may be interested in this one. And because this is actually a 17 image pano, it's big enough, the file's big enough that this image here could be printed 10 feet wide at high res. So I've kind of walked through, I'm kind of watching the time. I think we've got about 10 minutes left or so based on what I was told anyway. For Q&A, if you guys even have suggestions, ideas, I'm open to that. If any of you have done ICM or experimented with things that you think is interesting, love to hear it. Happy to answer questions now, but you can always email me. You can find me on Instagram at Pixel Dave. I'm on Facebook. However you'd like to get hold of me, you know, I'm available. And I typically will, if I occasionally, probably every couple of months or so, I'll do some kind of Zoom session. Maybe I'm doing one in July around some of the new features in Lightroom and Photoshop. It's up to the club people, of course, but I'm happy to send invitations out to anybody that would like to participate in any of those. There's no cost. I just do it to share the information. And so I'll stop there and see if there's any questions or anybody's got feedback or comments or tell me how to do this better. I'm happy to listen.
Hey, David, I was just going to tell you, I think I got a note from the room was having some audio problems. I think the Wi-Fi and where they are was a little spotty, so you may have cut in and out. I am recording this, and that's okay. I can play it back for the people who may have missed some of what you said.
I think we got most of it, but it jumped in and out and paused occasionally, but
Yeah, but when it started, You didn't lose it.
You didn't lose
Yeah,
it.
like went really fast and caught it. Popped back
Oh,
up.
it caught
I
up.
did- I have
Okay.
a
I sounded like a chipmunk. Is that what you're saying?
I was
It's
going
all
to.
right. That's recording,
I-
should be up.
I do have a couple of interests, and I love what you're talking about because the club knows me and they know Photoshop, and I know that's my passion to try to make things that pop like that. But anyways, have you ever tried? Two questions. Have you ever tried infrared photography in terms of creativity? And I'm one of the crazy people in the club who do that. And then and the other one is, how about this new generative fill that Photoshop has? I was thinking of you're extending the pictures like you did.
So great question. So the answer to the first question is I recently, in the last 3 months, bought a IR modified Nikon D810.
Mhm.
And I'm actually looking forward to actually trying some of that. Now, since I bought it, two things have been going on. Well, I have a lot going on, but one is I'm just opening up a studio and I've been in putting furniture together, putting down some floor, hanging lights, doing a bunch of different stuff. And I haven't got around to it yet, but it is something I do plan on exploring because I've always been fascinated with that style of photography, and I see the artistic possibilities there as pretty endless. It takes like a certain understanding of how the camera's seeing things to do it. But I've never, well, I want to experiment with it. I want to see what I can do with that. In terms of the Photoshop generative fill, so it's interesting you bring this up because I just did when I was in Florence. I took met some young study abroad students there, and there was one young man, and he had stumbled into another young woman there, and suddenly they're passionately in love. And we had a great dinner sitting next to them one night. It was the three guys, and then suddenly all these girls show up, and one of them's his girlfriend. And then the last night before I'm getting ready to come back, they're like, would you take our picture? Would you take our picture? And so they stood out in the middle of this Italian street and I took their picture. Well, there's a woman in the picture in the background, not connected to them, but standing between them and this little, sidewalk cafe. And I thought, this is a perfect place to try this generative fill, right? And so it was terrible. I mean, the results were terrible. And so I did a better job with the clone stand. Now, that being said, I have had some success in some other situations. And I think in places where you have an isolated object or there's not too much going on around it, I think it's probably good. Like you said, the extending in the past, I've found that to work pretty well. There's a couple of tricks in Photoshop to expand the horizons or expand the edges without, distorting your interior stuff. But
Anyways, good stuff and a good talk. Anyways,
who
Oh,
else?
I had a question on your ICM. You were talking about the lens that you use, and I think that's where we had a little bit of an interruption, but what do you recommend based on, it looks like most of that's landscape of some sort, right? So what do you recommend?
So I've had good luck with the lens that it's like an everyday walk around lens. Here's the beautiful thing about intentional camera movement photography. One is you're not trying to get everything sharp, so slow shutter speeds are okay. Depth of field could be shallow or deep, doesn't matter. You get a lot of flexibility and leeway in your settings. You're really looking for more of, can I get a right exposure? During the daytime, sometimes you have difficulty getting the shutter speed slow enough. Now, if you're shooting at 24 millimeters, for example, you're going to need a slower shutter speed than if you're shooting at 200 millimeters. So I walk around with a 24 to 200, and if I'm at 200 millimeter shooting, I may be able to shoot ICM at 1/30th, 1/40th of a second. If I'm shooting at 24 millimeters, I'm probably going to need to be down to about a fifth of a second or something to get enough movement and enough distortion, so to speak. I'm wondering if I can, I probably have to stop sharing. I was going to bring up my Lightroom because when I was in Florence, I did a fair amount of ICM trying to capture, think about these narrow streets with lights on them and the outside cafes and people walking down them. And it's a perfect vertical zoom, vertical ICM opportunity to create some really cool stuff because the buildings all have rows of windows on them, or they have stone facades that are vertical. They have balconies with vertical lines, lots of opportunities for great vertical ICM stuff. So I would suggest that you don't have to have a 2.8 lens. You don't have to have a 14 millimeter lens. You're better off if you've got a 24 to 70. That's probably ideal. And it could be at f4 because you're probably most of the time going to find yourself shooting at f8 to 11 at night and maybe as high as f22 during the daytime.
Good.
You may even need a filter.
Yeah, you mean neutral density?
Yeah, an ND filter. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's yeah.
What,
Oh, probably just a neutral density.
Oh,
of some sort, just to darken it down if you need
got
to.
it, okay.
You're
Yeah,
asking what I
there's
see.
daylight. Yeah, because even at if you're shooting at 24 to 50 millimeters in the daylight, even if you drop down to Nikon's native is 64 ISO at f22, it might still say you need to be at 1/70th of a second or 1/80th of a second or something for proper exposure. And that's still too fast. So sometimes you have to add a filter on to get a slow enough shutter speed that you can get the motion that you want. Now, you could always just try to move the camera real fast, but the problem is a little bit is if you're trying to stay perfectly up and down with the walls of a building, for example, or perfectly horizontal, believe it or not, moving fast it's hard to be perfectly level or perfectly straight up and down. It's easier if you can go just slow enough to just kind of ease your way up, and then you'll get probably better lines. I don't know how are we doing on time?
Hey, Tim?
Yeah, we're getting there. A couple more questions.
Thank you, David.
I just wanted to, I have a daughter that's a musician, and she had all of her instruments and stuff in her apartment on the wall, but housekeeping is her forte. And I did a kind of a fun thing of that wall was that I had a zoom lens, and I focused on the wall, and then with a slow exposure, I just zoomed out. And it made kind of a really cool motion that got rid of the housekeeping issues, but you can see the
So I was going to look. So here's an example. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, very cool.
so this is kind of what I was talking about, and I'm looking at this. So I'm at ISO 640, 69 millimeters, f6.3 at 1/5 of a second. And, you know, I've got several that I might want to choose from. And this is just one deal. And you talked about the zooming in. Let me go back. See here, I'm at 14 millimeters. Look at the curvature of these buildings. Now, some people might think, well, that's kind of a cool look, actually. I like that. And, you know, I haven't done anything with it. This is the raw file. What might you do with this? Well, some DAs would kind of kind of separate it out a little bit. You could add some, bring down the black hair. Certainly increase the,
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to go cooler with it.
Yeah.
I would ultimately, I would probably wind up doing, like a radial gradient and either cooling the center and warming the side or warming the center and cooling the side and get a contrast between warm and cool colors into the image as well. I was looking for, though, somewhere in here, I did, there's a zoom,
Oh, yeah.
same kind of thing. So I zoomed in. I also did some that were more of just the on this one, I just did all the zooms. So I was trying the same thing, and I'm trying to keep this tower right here in the center as the center point, because it becomes a focal point with everything leading toward that tower. So again, you just, it's part of the experimentation of ICM. And that's one of the things I love about it, is that to some degree, you may not know what you're going to get, which is kind of fun, but at the same time, if you have some certain techniques that you're familiar with and work, you start to be able to see those opportunities versus just randomly trying. You know going in, oh, well, this kind of pattern is going to work well if I use this type of movement to give you something to work with.
That sounds good. You got me excited. I'm going to Europe next month, so I got some ideas now.
See, this is more of a vertical one, and one that I kind of like. It's closer to what I was envisioning. I probably I'd probably edit this to try to make them a little more prominent. Again, it's all just different kinds of stuff. So
Very cool.
Well, good deal. Thank you.
Hey, thanks a lot. That was great. Boy, you got me excited about my next trip now.
excellent.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Great job.
Thank you so much. And like I said, reach out if you have any questions.
All right. Well, I appreciate it.